Hey guys, and welcome back to Rad Old Rat, my YouTube channel dedicated to all things skateboarding. Today we're going to set up this killer Street Creep reissue from Santa Cruz Skateboards. Now you might notice in the late 80s the word street was actually used a lot. Street creep, street thing, street wheels, street skating. Didn't exist before that. The big misconception is that that's when street skating began, when really skating started in the street. It eventually made its way to parks, bowls, ramps, but then a lot of those parks got shut down and the skaters had nowhere to go. So we went back to the streets where we belong. It was a wild scene, man. It was like treasure hunting. You'd go out, look for a new spot, something new, the imagination would go. It really was a beautiful thing. And to be honest, that's one of my favorite parts about skateboarding is finding spots, seeing a spot. On your way to work, heading to the grocery store, going to school, and you happen to notice something you didn't see before. The imagination starts going, you start thinking of all the tricks you can pull on that spot, and it's also something that never dies. You can be off your board for 20 years. If you still see spots everywhere you go, you're a skater. So let's get into the details of this board. At its widest, we're looking at 10 inches. 31.75 inches long. We got a tail length of just over 6 inches and then a nose of just over 5. Pulling that all together will be a wheelbase of 15.5 inches. I normally prefer a 14.5 inch wheelbase. I'm a shorter dude. I like a shorter board, a little tighter. It's easier for me to control, but I think we'll be just fine. But the real deal here is the artwork. This is my #1 favorite Jim Phillips graphic of all time. The amount of detail in here is absolutely unreal and it was all done by hand. When you have a closer look, you'll see that this is actually comprised of a bunch of random faces, skulls, flames, fire, bones, you name it. Just a beautiful tapestry of chaos and tragedy all rolled into one. If you're not familiar with Jim Phillips, he has a couple books out showcasing his contribution to skateboard graphics in the late 80s and early 90s. I highly recommend checking them out. Alright, with that out of the way, it's time to go grip this baby up and creep those streets. Let's go! I will eventually do a board without the checker tape, but this is slowly becoming my signature, so I'm going to go with it for this one. It can be a bit tricky to get it straight, but I find lining it up with the bolts really helps. I'm a goofy foot skater, so I figured it'd be less scary to have the shark going with me instead of coming at me. A lot of you might recognize this guy, but for those who don't, it was one of the old Santa Cruz Speed Wheels logos. It's actually supposed to be on the tail. It came on a sheet of mob grip, but the rest of it was clear, but I thought it would look a lot cooler in the center. So I'm keeping a bit of a theme in sticker placement this time, mostly that it's just heavily Santa Cruz and that the colors kind of match up. Nothing quite says 80s skating like the Santa Cruz Screaming Hand, another amazing contribution from Jim Phillips. It's between that and the Powell Peralta Ripper. You would see these two images anywhere you saw skateboarding in the 80s. So when I did the giveaway board, I loved the way this screaming mouth looked against a checker, so I just had to do one for myself. And again, keeping with the classics, we gotta throw the old indie logo on there. So I'm not gonna lie, going into this, I didn't consider the fact that I had never done this before and I had no idea how I was going to do it. I had hoped it was gonna be as simple as tracing and cutting, and it turned out to be just that. The only thing is you gotta make sure to mirror the image because you're gonna be doing it backwards. I used a bit of painter's tape so that nothing would stick to the grip tape, and then a bit of duct tape just to keep those two together. I was really careful to make sure that all points of contact were down so that I got a really accurate tracing, and then when cutting I went good and slow. It went over every little bump that I did so it would line up perfectly. So this is where I got a little nervous, realizing that I had to go over the tracing as well as line it up along the checker tape. But luckily, because I took my time and I measured everything out right, it lined up perfectly. I know I was bragging in my first video about having this massive cache of grip tape on hand and being ready to go whenever, but I'm down to my scraps now, so that's why we're going to use 2 pieces for the tail. Okay, so we're almost done. We're all gripped up. All that's left is to file and sand. Before we go ahead and do that though, we're just going to cut some relief into the edges of the tape. So the idea behind the filing is to trace the outline of the board before taking a blade to trim off the tape. The friction from the filing also helps melt the tape into the wood a bit to prevent it from peeling. Personally, I just like to file the tape right into the wood and then peel it off without the use of a blade. Okay, last step, we're just going to take some of the scraps we have left over, fold it in half, and then use it to sand the edges. I also like to sand the top of my board. Ironically enough, I don't like brand new fresh grip tape, so I'll just give the top a once over as well. To finish the setup, we're going to throw on my independent truck, size 159 with 56mm Pal Peralta dragons and bone Swiss bearings. I skate my trucks pretty tight, so I only use 1/8 risers to avoid wheel bite. Alright guys, that was a lot of fun. This board actually feels amazing. I think I'm going to make it my main ride for a while. So if you did like the video, make sure to leave a like. If you have any questions about this board or anything else I've done, leave me a comment down below or just share your thoughts. And while we're sharing, share this video around so we can reach more rad skaters just like you. Until next time, stay rad.